You're listening to the Valley Current.
See you. How's it going?
Good. Well, I got a new laptop here, and I'm ever-changing world that I'm living in here.
Really? Are you updated and completely new equipment for the new year that we're not quite at yet?
Let me get see if I get my lighting right here. Well, I'll have to, there, can you see me okay?
Yeah, it looks like you're behind bars, though. I don't think you're in jail, are you?
No, I think this is
pretty funny. Well, let's turn to the topic at hand that we were talking about, which is that I sent you this image earlier today, because I think it is the big picture driver of what's happened over the last really 50 and soon going on 60 years from the 1960s when we were in grade school. Maybe you were in kindergarten at that point, Joe.
That is true.
but basically, I don't want to make you older than you are, but basically I remember being in grade school, and really it wasn't on the radar of my grade school that there would ever be anything that even comes close to where we are today in the modern internet. But there was a realization that television, which really is the technology of the 1960s, was becoming a significant way people got information, and that it was moving from radio to television. Now, you did a number of your shows on radio, terrestrial radio, right? Where you're actually broadcasting to AM and FM channels.
Right.
People are listening mostly in their car, mostly during rush hour traffic as a way to sort of pass the time. And even that has changed because now internet gets delivered to cars on different techniques, like Teslas have Wi-Fi baked in, and people, of course, have their phones in their car, which means they're on the internet. And they're often listening to stuff that's delivered by the internet and not by terrestrial radio. So they listen to podcasts. But if you look at this path, it's like, we go from the military ARPANET to a bunch of standard protocols to the Ethernet to then the internet. And then from the internet, you start seeing companies emerge in the 1990s that some are still around. Most are gone or merged or sort of consolidated in some way. And, MySpace was taken over by Facebook just a few years later. Napster went out of business. And you see there's been an amazing amount of activities. And of course, you could do a chart like this with respect to real estate lending and with respect to real estate agency. And you would see probably it was more like 2005 or 2006 or 2007, 10, 15 years ago, that people started to recognize that shopping was going online, including for homes.
Right.
I mean,
I would think the early 2000s, the meltdown of 2008 and 2009, the mortgage meltdown brought a lot of that to a head. But I think the early 2000s, and when I remember almost the very first, what was the name of, I can't think of the name of the company, the very first mortgage company that put a stake in the sand and said, we're going to be an online mortgage company. Everybody just panicked in the mortgage industry. But what we didn't understand is there were so many archaic systems and processes, and the government's involved with Fannie, Freddie, et cetera, and big banks, which are very government-like. Just because someone had an idea they were going to make an online platform for lending, everybody got nervous about it. And soon we found out that it really didn't make any difference. Now, this was in the early kind of mid, 2004, 2005. And then 2008, 2009, you had to crash, a lot of reorganizations of mortgage business and brokers and bankers and that type of thing. I would, only because I've been in this since about 2001 or 2000, I could tell you that right around 2015, 2016 is when online really started taking shape, and you really could start tracking the amount of business that people had conducted online versus going through traditional channels in the mortgage business. It's funny, Jack, you know better than anybody. When you have a software company or like a Facebook or a Google that makes an announcement, we're going to do this the first time and everything's going to be online, I think they really mean it. And I think people take that serious because of of what they've done and their experience and their capabilities. But back then, you got to realize when a mortgage company or a real estate company said, we're going to do more online stuff, it made people nervous, but really nothing changed other than people navigated a little bit of stuff online, if that makes sense.
Right. What happens is these big companies make announcements to kind of freeze the market, but banks took a long time to follow the lead of what I would call the early fintech pioneers.
Yes.
Who lost a lot of money, but now banks are pretty much in the game and everything seems to be done electronically. Of course, over the period of the pandemic, it all had to be done that way, but by and large, it's still being done that way with mobile notaries and the like. And the reason I put up this big screen of the big history over the last 50 plus years is Zillow comes on the scene. And now Zillow announced recently, and I guess it boosted its stock price, that they fully believe the Zillow platform will be AI empowered, that is empowered by artificial intelligence to assist in the overall shopping process, which is almost like saying you write the 10 things you want, presumably location is the first 3. And, you got to pick the particular city, the particular country, I guess start with the country, then go to the state, then go to the city, and then go to the neighborhood and pick that zip code or some sub part of it. And then say, what size house do you need and what's your price range? And they'll come back with a bunch of recommendations, and they'll come back with kind of a statement of whether the price that's being asked is within the ballpark of what the dollar value should be, almost like a negotiating, almost like an assistant in negotiations, right?
Yeah, I could see with the evolution of AI, I could really see it taking more shape and having a bigger impact on real estate at the moment than it will have on lending. I keep coming back to that because lending is still, there's so much involved with income and assets. And do you have a job and do you not have a job? And are you self-employed and do you have a corporation? And how do you earn your income? And you are a partnership. And there's so many things that, AI it's going to take a little while. But you take a real estate transaction, Jack, as you know, you've done hundreds over your life.
Right.
Real estate, is becoming so easy to navigate and understand, and to get the information at your fingertips is so easy. So I can see a company like Zillow with an AI adoption really taking this to another level. It'll be interesting how this will impact the industry and how long it will take to have a significant impact.
Right. Well, remember, the way it starts is Zillow starts gathering a lot of information, right? And getting users. I mean, they've got their story online, so I'll just put up the screen just as a way for us to kind of verify what the facts are as they tell it. The Zillow Group is the company that runs Zillow. Their mission statement is make home a reality for more people. That's a big, big statement, right? And, they pretty much came up with this idea of, hey, we need to get a lot of data onto the site, but they didn't want to pay for people. They got a lot of people to do it themselves, right? To put pictures up and the like. And so they build a lot of data, and then they scraped a lot of data off of a lot of different locations. And so they have, I'm just going to look in their media room to see if they have the story of, they've got, I guess, the story in their press releases, but they issued a press release December 11th, which was yesterday or today?
That's today.
Today, mortgage rates falling from 23-year highs brought some holiday cheer. I guess you know about that. But there was something about AI that really surprised me that I forwarded to you. because they have a lot of data. Now, obviously, mortgage rates really do either juice the market or retard the market, right?
Yeah.
I'm just looking to see if they say something about AI here. I guess the rates are slightly different in different markets as well.
The rates dropped below 7% for the first time in several months. They were close to 8% at one point, and they just dropped below 7%. So they're in the high sixes. And I think most of us believe when they get back into the kind of the 5% range, it's probably going to create more activity in the marketplace. But yeah, they did take a nice little drop the last week or so. That's for sure.
So it's not the best time of year to be selling a house, right? Just generally speaking, don't things
No, not really.
down?
No, it's not. No.
I mean, people don't want to view until maybe after the Super Bowl. Is that the sort of historical?
That's correct.
That people talk about?
That's correct. Here's this is maybe the article on AI. How you're talking about?
Yeah, this is the AI natural language search, but they did another AI announcement more recently, and that's the one I was looking for, which I'm not finding, that made it sound like you were going to get a much more overall presentation about what artificial intelligence is saying about the pricing and the value of where AI would take you. And I thought I had that handy 5 days ago. Okay, this is it. Zillow says you'll buy your home with AI. So let's run a minute of this for a second.
Yeah.
This is the one that I think I sent you.
Yes.
Let's run a minute of it.
We just think that human connection is so integral that AI will mostly be supercharging them, not replacing them.
So Zillow's got a couple of different AI tools. Can you walk us through how the platform has changed and where it's going from here?
So Zillow's been, an AI-focused company from the beginning. Obviously, many people think of the Zestimate and also how we think about search ranking. I think the current wave is not hype. It's definitely very real for us. The improvements we're making are not only affecting, buyers and renters as they go through the whole flow, but also we're doing a lot behind the scenes with agents and loan officers. And it's a mix of AI that's very visible, like, hey, you could fly through a floor plan, as well as behind the scenes, making the kind of tasks that you don't want to be spending time on a lot easier.
And what kind of tasks are we talking about? Like what things are being simplified? Is it like the search tool is getting more conversational, or what does this look like?
Searching and finding a home is still incredibly complicated. You have to think about all your preferences, all your requirements, what you can afford, what neighborhoods are out there, places you haven't been, all the above. And so one of the biggest things that we're investing in is natural language search. Before generative AI, a lot of the techniques were old school natural language processing. And now with transformers and the like, we can make that experience much smarter. So it's just more intuitive. And then on the agent side, agents really sell themselves by that personal relationship and that guidance that everyone needs to move, and yet have to spend a ton of time basically coordinating and nurturing people who aren't ready to move, as well as in paperwork mode. If you've moved, all the title and escrow stuff, all the transaction stuff. And so AI can help in both poles, helping people get going, as well as helping the transaction actually finish, so that the agents can focus on hey, what should we tour? What should we offer? That kind of human-to-human connection.
So one thing I think is interesting here is that, people probably don't think of real estate as a tech business, but I think it's probably fair to say that Zillow is a tech company, right? Like it's an online platform. How much of the user experience of going to Zillow.com is interacting with AI now, and where's that going? Like 5 years from now, do you think AI and interacting with chatbots is going to be a much bigger part of the platform, or is it something that creeps in more slowly depending on how people react to it?
I think we're at the kind of teenager phase of this wave, and anytime there's a new AI technology, it usually starts with what we've witnessed with generative AI of everything's going to change. Like, hold on to your hats, tomorrow's going to be different. And then you get to phase two, which is hold on, all of our ideas aren't really coming to pass as fast as we thought, or maybe in the ways that we thought. And we got to figure out what the long-term path here is. And so my take is, I think we're kind of at the Alta Vista level of generative AI, where there's something there, there's definitely value, but we haven't figured out the right UX model for this long term. We are trying to figure out how much a chat experience can help guide people, as well as, the more traditional property search information retrieval story. We need both. And it's sometimes complicated to figure out how they work in parallel. And so that's something we're looking at a lot. And then also, we think there's huge amounts of opportunity behind the scenes with agents and loan officers in their workflow. They're already spending a lot of time clicking buttons, doing these tasks. And so we're more bullish on how generative AI can adopt that kind of UX than necessarily a pure chat experience.
So to me, Joe, the signaling I'm getting from that is they're going to try to build some sort of set of screens for agents and for loan brokers as the new next extension of Zillow.
Right.
Like the chat, the way to think about it is the chat GBT Zillow or the Zillow GBT will generate a bunch of conversations that then, if you're licensed as one of their licensees from the agent side, they'll forward you that chat and tell you their synthesis of where the buyer or buyers, if it's a couple, are going and what the limits are, what they'll spend and all that jazz, kind of synthesizing a lot of information, right?
Anytime we have this new hype and technology, in this case, AI, I think everybody, I mean, I did a little bit of it myself. I remember when it was being talked about a year ago or so, maybe more. Well, you just jumped on every day. I was testing it. I was working with it. I was messing with it. I was trying to, and it's pretty slick, but then you realize there's still so much work that has to be done in it to perfect it to where our minds go right away. Right away, our minds go again. Unfortunately, oh my God, this is going to eliminate people and jobs and processes and companies and look at where we are now. It's certainly going to make a big difference in what we do, but it'll take some time to weed out and figure out how it's going to work best. And I do. We haven't talked about it for a while. I'll give you a bit of an example. Remember, Jack, several years ago, we were doing several podcasts on blockchain.
Right.
Remember when blockchain was really exciting topic and it made so much sense, and it's a numbered system and ID system and why, it should take out, we used real estate as an example, why would you really need any person in a real estate transaction if you had blockchain? Title, everything, right? And so then where did that go? I know it's still being worked on. I know it's still, evolving. I know and I guess so I'm looking, it seems like AI is a little bit, maybe not exactly, but what's your take on, initially you have this hype and excitement, and then we kind of come down to earth and realize it's going to take a little while.
Well, I'll give you the best example that I have, because I was an early adopter, early helper to people that were building virtual reality systems back in the 1980s, 40 plus years ago.
Wow.
And those people are now, like me, getting older, and they're saying all my patents, all my intellectual property, more or less, is in the public domain. And all of a sudden, Meta comes out with a set of glasses. They bought the company Oculus. They finally, I'm going to say, perfected. I used the Quest 3 headset, which is their latest and greatest $500 device. And it is an actual augmented reality set of glasses. Now, it's not like clear glasses like you have. It still looks like virtual reality, but it's got a camera so you can see in front of you, but through the camera. So you're seeing a picture. If I had those on, and I'll get a headset set up. I use this at a test site. But basically you wear this headset that covers your eyes, but you can see ahead of you. So you can watch TV while you're playing a video game, which I guess some people do to kind of keep their ADHD going. They are able to kind of do so many things at the same time. But theoretically, you can imagine that the future of Zoom, the future of Zillow, the future of all of these tools that are fundamentally online tools is you wear a headset while you're talking to an agent. Now, 40 years ago, that wasn't the use case that was imagined. 40 years ago, it was more like, oh, the military are going to put this in a cockpit and make it so you can fire on a target better, using your hands and gesturing a lot faster than pressing buttons on the plane. And from that, it went to, well, maybe eventually inside of a factory, you'll be able to move stuff around. Now, robots took that over. And then there was this lull period for about 30 years after the initial hype, where they call it the VR winter. Just like you could say there's been a bit of a crypto winter or a blockchain winter. And there was an AI winter as well, because I was there in the 1980s when AI was starting to take hold, but people were wondering, what's the use case? And then all the patents go into the public domain, and a new generation of people come in and figure out a way to use that information and build on the sort of shoulders of giants. So the short answer is maybe you have to have these lull periods that sometimes last for over a decade, sometimes even several decades. I mean, look, Tesla didn't invent the electric car. The original guy, Nikola Tesla, the original guy did have the invention of electric car over 100 years ago. And it just didn't make it to the market. Like literally, there was an electric car in 1912 that was invented with a battery. But the battery technology was nowhere near where it is today. So we have these peaks and troughs and peaks and troughs, and you can almost argue that recessions and maybe even depressions are a good thing because they force people to get more hardy. And as a result of getting more grit, they build ideas, they create new ideas. But, you know, Zillow is sort of taking advantage of this AI explosion. They've got the data. They've got the tools, right? They can do it.
Yeah. I'll give people a sneak into the future that I think is coming, and I'll do a little bit of futuristic thinking. You know, one of my strengths is called ideation.
Right. We know that.
I know you and I talk about that a lot. So this is what I imagine, and I don't know if it's a year away or 2 years away or more, but we already have the virtual reality. It's coming into sync. And I'm gonna put this together, unpack it as it relates to real estate. Okay. We already have the 360 camera views of homes, and you could go in and view a home and see the closets in the backyard and all the little niches and everything. So I would say one of the next things coming will be either through your computer or online platform, you get a virtual reality tour with not only you get almost an avatar-like agent that will walk you through. And this will be one of these, you ever see the AI automated, assistants and all these kinds of things?
Right.
I do think you'll have a situation, and it may be they'll even, I'll give you an example. We do business with EXP. Well, EXP has a completely, they were far ahead of this kind of, they call it avatar living, where everybody's online and they actually make kind of cartoon figures out of the people and how they kind of look. So, they would say, look, here's Jack, and it would look like you, but it's a cartoon character, but you're adapted fully as an AI individual, which is interesting. So you might be walking a person through a home. It's got a picture of you, but all the information that you're gathering and then returning back to the consumer is generated by AI, and you're nowhere in sight as a real person.
Right. That's kind of a view of how maybe the information collection process becomes gamified.
Yes.
And it becomes gamified around, 80% of people in your age bracket really prefer to have walkability. Are you within that 80% group? Because that's going to get rid of a whole bunch of candidate properties that are not walkable, right?
Yeah.
That becomes a big factor for certain people. For example, San Francisco, if you've ever walked the streets of San Francisco, you sometimes hit some really big hills that are not easy to get up. And if you're in your 60s, and certainly if you're in your 80s or 90s and you want walkability, you probably don't want to be on something where you're going to have to climb your way back to your flat or back to your condo. You want something that's a little flatter, right? And so there's so many different nuances that you have to get information on. And unless you almost live in the house, that's why I think in many ways the Airbnb model of the future is like, we'll help you sell your home, but we're going to actually open it up to people who live in it for a while, and then someone will fall in love with it. And that becomes like a broker-free transaction because they don't need a broker. They found the place on their own. They fell in love with it. And then they use some AI tool to say, what's the right price for us to make an offer? And you see that there are people that don't even want to use agents at all. They literally want to bypass all of it. But of course, there is a lot of transaction paperwork that hasn't quite made its way to a bundle select kind of simplified approach, but eventually it should get there, right?
Yeah, I think there is. I haven't seen a lot of research on this, but I also believe this, again, we get excited and we have to be tempered a little bit with the housing market because especially in areas like Silicon Valley, New York, and even to a certain extent, Florida, maybe homes are still very expensive. Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, the average home, I know I saw that quick list that you had up there as part of that article. I mean, I think San Francisco was over $1 million and there was, LA over $1 million, New York. So my point is, most of the wealth still resides in, let's say, the 50 plus older generation.
Right.
And even though, the baby boomers grew up a little bit in technology, I think some of us, like you and myself, we stay in tune and we work with it every day, but not a lot of people do. And as that wealth gets transferred back downwards towards the younger generation, they'll be making more and more decisions with technology-driven minds. I do a lot of financing with young couples here in the Bay Area, and they may be great engineers and really smart, tech people and marketing people and work for these high-tech companies and get paid pretty well. There's a reason why a couple in their mid-20s could afford $1 million home with 20 or 30% down, because they make pretty good money and they got some bonus and sign-on stuff. But in some cases, they're not making major decisions with their money. Some of that money I see coming from parents, grandparents, trusts, different things. So, I don't know if I'm articulating well, but I think that the more and more the younger generation gets more wealth, this will become even more interesting in how things like Zillow and AI and lending and AI and stuff starts playing a bigger role in a lot of this.
No, I think you've been articulate about people lean into the technology first because that's what they're used to doing. I mean, kids 3-4 years old already have smart tablets and iPhones and whatnot, and they're used to pressing those buttons. I think it's going to go to voice, and I think it's going to very much go to gesturing with a free mouse in the air, the way the Quest 3 does it. I mean, it may not be Quest 3, it may be something else, but you'll get more productivity through voice than people typing, because even the fast typists can't go as fast as we talk. And the voice recognition is getting better and better. And overall, people will find that they can get thoughts across, and hopefully they'll become more articulate and not less articulate. Of course, there's a counter view to that, because it's almost like gesturing. People want to use gestures as shorthand and emojis and the like. But the point that you're making is they're leaning into technology first, and almost the technology has more credibility than the expert. You're an expert in lending. Old school, I would just call you up and say, Joe, what do you think I can get to refinance a property where loan to value is, say, 50-50, and it's a jumbo loan, and I've got an 820 score or whatever is the highest score, and blah, 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 all the other facts. And you would be able to almost instantly think about it and say, well, the range is from here to here and so on. I think if you talk to my daughter, and certainly if you talk to my grandson, now a teenager, he'd say, I'm not going to pick up the phone and call anyone. I'm going to go online and I'm going to research it online. And of course, ChatGPT would say, or maybe Bard or one of the more recent Microsoft versions of ChatGPT would say, just come on the site and have a conversation, type in a few words, and we'll start the conversation going. We'll even ask you questions and we'll make it interactive. And you're saying the avatar takes that over, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think you make a good point. I know it's funny. I mean, my daughters aren't teenagers, they're in their 20s, but I find it interesting. None of them want to talk on the phone very much at all. They don't, everything's online. They're so used to doing that. Automatically, they grab their phones. It's so funny. I don't know if your kids or your grandkids, but it's so funny that, in other words, they don't even have their voicemail set up. Remember, we always, in business, you better have your voicemail set up, right? This is Jack Russo. Please leave a message, right? It's funny. I call my daughters and some young people. It goes right into voicemail. There's no courtesy. There's no introduction. Isn't that funny?
Well, you're saying there's no greeting. Yes, I would go even further to say they're probably going to cut off the voicemail altogether and say, leave me a text. And then the thing shuts down. We don't want your voice. Right. I mean, I said to someone the other day, I met this person for the first time, and I said, do you have a business card? And they were like, what's a business card? I swear, that's what they said. What's a business card? I said, well, you're in business, right? And I pulled out a business card. This is a card. It has my business address. It has my email address. It has my phone number. It has my cell number. And I handed it, and they said, I've never been through that. And they were probably in their late 20s. So how far have we become that business cards are not part of the mentality of new business people? We used to spend a lot of money on business cards. We thought they were like, letterhead. You had to have letterhead for your formal letters. That's gone the wayside, Joe. That's gone away.
Oh, I know. Well, I think there's an app, if I'm not mistaken, because it happened to me a couple of times where someone will just, if they're near your phone, they could just grab your contact from you, right?
Yeah, they said you could click my phone, or we could airspace it over. I was like, just give me your number. I'll write it on a piece of paper, like old school. Or I said, do you remember paper? And do you remember a pen? I was joking because they were like, yeah, okay, if you want to do that, you're showing your age. I said, okay, I guess I'm showing my age. But yeah, I think the point that's being made is right. The technology will continue because younger people want to use it. We now have a generation beyond Gen Z, people that were born essentially in what's now be called Gen Alpha. So now there's a new generation called Generation Alpha.
Interesting.
And the Generation Alpha people are going to become of age soon. And they grew up with devices. They grew up with voice recognition. They grew up with Alexa. They grew up with all these voice tools. They grew up with Siri. They're going to expect to use that stuff on a regular basis that we don't. And that's going to change things yet again. And so I'm now convinced that people will start using augmented reality as a way to get more and more information, to squeeze more and more information in less and less time. And they'll say, why do you need a business card? I can just look you up on the internet. Your name is Jack Russo. I can get everything off that. You don't have to give me a business card. In fact, I've got glasses on that already tells me they whispered to me what your email address is. I've got it. In fact, I know what your age is. I know your birthday. I know a bunch of stuff about you. You don't need to tell me anything. It's all there.
Yeah. As we kind of draw closer, one of the things that popped into my mind, and you and I used to talk about a lot, I'd love to do it again sometime. Remember, and I wonder if companies still do it, and I wonder what the format looks like. But one of the things I've always loved is the focus groups and think tanks, right? So you get a bunch of smart people around and they start whiteboarding, and you take a topic and you kind of go through it, right? You've been through it for many years.
Right.
And the think tanks and this. And how about the focus groups where someone's trying to come out with a product? So they get a group of people in a room and they test it and talk about it, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, how do those, in a little bit, this ties in a little bit of real estate and kind of no matter what industry in, how do you think those focus groups and think tanks look like today, Jack, and how they act versus maybe 25, 30 years ago? Do they still get in a room, or are they on Zoom? Do they use AI and not their own mind power? I don't know why, but this just came to me too. How do those look these days in the way they used to?
I'll tell you what the really weird synergy is of what you're saying. I was just talking to a guy who's a jury consultant, and he literally says they're still doing in-person focus groups with two-way mirrors.
They are.
In big cases, with 3 sets of 12 jurors each in different rooms. So 3 different rooms, 3 sets of glass. So think of it like a room that has 3 walls. And then the witness is testifying and people can look through the glass, and it's sort of like a set of rooms that surrounds another room, but with two-way mirrors.
Okay.
And then they each assess the credibility of the story or the credibility of the witnesses. And that's costing like $50,000 to $100,000 in doing that kind of work. So you're saying, well, how do these Madison Avenue kind of marketing people, if you remember the Mad Men show, they used to sit around with whiteboards and clipboards and blackboards and ways to collect all this disparate data. How is that being done today? And I think there are companies that are still doing it old school, where they literally get people in a room with Post-it notes and flip charts and whiteboards and blackboards, and they just brainstorm. And they record it. I think the difference is now they do video it. They do try to capture as much of it as they can. But the poor man's way of doing it is pretty much online and using different online grouping techniques, sometimes paying for Mechanical Turk, which is an Amazon service that allows you to group together a random set of people and ask them a series of questions and see how they answer. And so I think there's the whole spectrum in the cases or the projects that deserve it. They'll do it in person and with experts. I mean, look, if you assembled, I did this in a case recently. You assemble 5 retired judges. You present the same story to all 5 on Zoom without them talking to each other, and then separately get their view of the case. It's amazing how different. You'll often hear 5 different judges. All 5 of them are in their 70s or 80s, and they're 5 very well-regarded judges, and they'll have 5 different opinions about the same case. And these are judges. Yeah.
Wow.
So you can understand that humans react differently to the information that they hear, and they assess cases differently. Now, it's just the snapshot of a case, so it's not the whole case. So you could say, well, you'd have to spend a lot of time in presenting a case, because a typical case that goes to trial is a couple of weeks. You've sat in the jury and you've sat around for a couple of weeks listening to a case. And you determine credibility over time as you assess what the witnesses say and how well it ties together or it doesn't tie together. Right? So, I think there's a range of it, but more and more of it is going online, and more of it is looking to go online just to save money and to save time and to get more immediate information, right? Because when you do your next business, when you do your next startup, which I know will probably arrive sooner rather than later, as you do more and more ideation around different things that you're exposed to, you'll want to test it and hear how people react to it. And you might want to test it in a very online way with confidentialities, agreements signed and the like, because you got to be careful about that.
Right.
But I think it's happening, and I think it's going to continue to happen. And obviously, Zillow has become the leading provider. I don't even know if there's another competitor out there fundamentally.
I don't think so. Not in the real estate space, and still to this day, which amazes me, and I think it's going to be the downfall. My prediction is the Zillows of the world, and even, and probably because I know more about them over the last couple of years than I do more than a company like EXP Real Estate will have a better fighting chance because of the amount of money that they've invested in technology, and they have a virtual philosophy for business. As you know, they have no physical buildings,
Right.
and they're the first real estate company, and they're one of the largest in the world. So it proves it could work. And so now it's funny. I met with a real estate executive yesterday or the day before. I forget. Maybe it was even Friday. Anyway, he was telling me that they're finally consolidating real estate and realizing they don't need as much real estate. So, I mean, these guys are so behind the curve. So I think a company like Zillow and a company like an EXP are going to be light years ahead of any kind of changes coming in the real estate industry because they've already made those adjustments and bought off on that philosophy of moving forward and investing in technology and a smart way of doing business.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is the real estate people are a little bit like lawyers. They take a while, but once the technology is proven, they start to adopt rapidly, and then they start to do cost management. So law firms are also cutting back on their space. They're going to more of a hotel model where it's basically conference rooms, and no one except very few senior people have nameplates. That's what they're calling. To have an office is to have your name on the door of the office. That's called a nameplate. Like, are you a nameplate partner? Then you get the corner office, right? The nameplate means, in Europe, of course, when you go to an office, they actually have your name listed if you're a lawyer. And New York, the old school New York way, you were listed in the marquee in the building as sort of like you are there, you're tenured there. Silicon Valley, there's no such concept. There's no marquee, there's no tenure, there's no nameplate, but now they're calling it to have an office is to have a nameplate on the door. But everyone else is basically free floating and in a hotel room.
Yeah, I think I brought this up a couple of years ago, but I'll do it again as we kind of wrap up. Is that the legal industry? One of the most impressive things, right? And you knew when you walked into a law firm, and you just were astounded by the thousands of books, right? The legal books that are lined to the walls from ceiling. In some cases, you'd have to get up on one of those sliding ladders to get up to those books, right?
Right.
So I think people are getting a visual image of what I'm talking about, and you know better than anybody. Do the new law firms of today, does that even exist anymore in presence of the consumer when they walk into the offices?
If you go to a big New York law firm, they'll still have a glass library that they'll walk their clients past to say, we're here, we invest. But if you go to the modern law firm has a very advanced cappuccino machine that they'll show the client. And they'll say, we invest in the best coffee. We can get you the best cappuccino that you'll ever get for free from our office. And literally the machine will be like a $10,000 high-end machine that has all this robotic automation to it. And that's the difference between old law and brand new law. And the reason that people will go to the office will be, hey, they've got a great coffee machine, and they serve food, and they'll take care of, lots of other stuff for you. Sometimes they'll take care of your dry cleaning. They'll take care, like it's basically a community center for the people that are part of the firm, but it's not to go to the library. Whereas years ago, the reason you had an office, you had a shared library. You were sharing the price of the books. That's what you were doing. So you're right about that. So it's really changing, and obviously it's having an effect throughout the knowledge industry, like throughout the entire course of knowledge workers.
Well, this is interesting topics, and I know I've said it before, but I'm going to start committing to at least 2 podcasts a week now, getting things ramped back up. So we'll be having some more and more discussion on the evolution of technology and much more, for sure.
Well, Joe, I know that there's another startup about to happen. I can feel it at the tip of your tongue, but you don't want to tell me yet, but that's okay. We'll wait until the new year, or maybe you'll come to Mexico and we'll see you ahead of that. I'll get you the logistics for that. And if I don't, or if I don't see you, have a happy holiday. Thanks for spending the time this afternoon.
Well, I can tell you this, once it's in my head and ready to come out, you'll be the first one. So
All right. Good to talk to you. Take care. Talk to you later.
All right,
Bye-bye.
All right, Jack.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.